Thank you for joining us today. My name is Diane, and I'm an animal care specialist here at Brookfield Zoo. Today we're going to meet our meerkats. Meerkats are a member of the mongoose family, and they come from southern Africa. They have a lot of really interesting social behaviors, which I thought we'd talk about some today. This group of meerkats is a family. They consist of a mom and her 4 adult offspring. In their native habitat, meerkats live in family groups just like they do here at Brookfield Zoo. Sometimes the family group is one mom and one dad and several offspring. Sometimes they're a big family group, but they always live together, and they have a lot of cooperative behaviors that help them do well and survive. Some of the things that they do that help them survive are related to their communication style. When they're foraging, meerkats will make a lot of vocalizations. I don't know if you can hear them right now, but they're vocalizing at us with our camera. But while they're also, you can see animals foraging here, and they do make those little vocalizations so that they can communicate with each other. If they're in their native habitat, it's easy for them to get separated, so the vocalizations help the group know where the different members of the group are at. It would also help them communicate what kind of food they're finding that maybe some of the other animals would want to come and share with them. If they were in their native habitat instead of here at the zoo where they feel safe and secure, you would see that one animal might take turns being a sentry. What that means, it's kind of like a guard dog. One animal will find a high place to stand where they can see their surroundings, and they will stand up on their hind legs and watch for danger. Right now, because they're here in the zoo and they feel safe, they don't always display that behavior because they don't think there's any danger they need to watch for. But in the wild, that animal is keeping the other animals safe, and they all take turns doing that behavior so that each animal gets a chance to eat and each animal has a chance to be the guard. Some of the other things they do to cooperate is to take care of the young ones together. As I mentioned, sometimes there's more than one adult female in the group, so there is a possibility that they could have 2 litters of pups at the same time. So all of the group will take care of the pups regardless of who the mother is, and they will bring them food when they're able to eat solids. They'll take babysitting chores over the little ones while the moms are out foraging, and if there are 2 nursing moms, they will even nurse each other's babies sometimes. And that helps their whole group and their whole family survive in the wild. As you can hear, I don't know if you can hear them right now, they're vocalizing softly to each other. They have a lot of different kinds of vocalizations that they make. Right now they're doing those little soft contact calls, which helps them remain in communication with each other and know where everybody is and what they're doing. But they can also make a lot of louder noises. In their native habitat, if they see a predator or something that alarms them, they will make a loud, more piercing call to let the rest of the group know that danger is near. And they are really interesting in that they can make different calls based on what the danger is that they see. If they see a bird in the sky, like an eagle or a hawk, that might want to catch them, they will make a different noise than they would if they're seeing an animal on the ground that might be a predator. That way, the animals that don't see the predator but just hear the alarm call will know how to respond and what best they can do to keep themselves safe. The other noises that they make that are loud would be if they were wanting to scare off a predator, they will puff up their fur like a lot of animals do when they want to look bigger and more scary, and then they can kind of make a hissing or growling sound to try and scare a predator away if they encounter something and they're not able to take shelter. Some of the other ways that they can communicate with each other are by their body posture. Like I mentioned before, if they encounter something dangerous, puffing themselves up to look bigger might help them drive away a predator or scare something off. But as you can see, these guys are pretty relaxed, so they have a relaxed posture. They're not looking around a lot. They're just kind of minding their own business. But if something is really interesting to them and they really want to check it out, they'll walk around with their tail elevated. It's similar to how you can kind of read the behavior of your pets at home if you have pets. They are able to read each other's behavior and their mood based on their body posture. They do also have a form of more remote or long distance communication where they have scent glands where they mark items in their territory. So an animal can leave its scent on a rock or a plant in their native habitat where other animals will know that somebody from my group has been here, or if an animal from another group of meerkats comes into that area, they know there's already somebody living there because they're able to smell that scent. And members of a group can distinguish the scent of any individual from their group from those markings. So it helps them feel cohesive as a group, and it helps them let other meerkats know that this place is already occupied. You see one on the left right now doing kind of a sentry behavior, standing up on its hind legs real briefly. But like I said before, they feel so comfortable here in the zoo that they usually don't do it for very long because they're more concerned with getting their turn eating, and they don't feel unsafe enough to continue that behavior like they would in the wild. At this point, I can take some questions. If anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer them.
What do they eat?
Here in the zoo, the meerkats eat a lot of different things. We want to provide them a lot of variety so that it keeps them healthy nutritionally and also keeps their environment interesting. So you can see right now they're eating some vegetables. They have shredded carrots and sweet potatoes. They eat almost every vegetable except they don't like broccoli, but they will eat almost any vegetables and fruits. And then they also get insects. So every day they get a few insects, and because in their native habitat, they eat a lot of insects and a lot of eggs or small animals that they might be able to catch. We do want to provide them with a high protein diet here, so they get cat food as well every day, dry cat food for their teeth and wet cat food, and that keeps them with a high amount of protein and balances out all the fruits and vegetables that they get here.
What's their favorite food?
Probably their favorite food is the insects. We get a variety of different insects here at the zoo. One of their favorites is mealworms, and they're kind of crunchy. They also like crickets and waxworms. They really enjoy digging for them. We throw them a lot of times in the mulch on the ground, and that's a natural behavior for them, is to dig in that substrate and find those insects, and they really love doing that. And if you see this animal over here on the rock near this feeding device, we can put insects in that feeding device, and it has little holes where the animal has to turn the log to get the insects or whatever food we put in that to fall out of the holes. So that's another way that we keep them busy and try to provide something that compares to their wild behavior, where they would maybe be digging into logs and branches to look for insects.
How many meerkats are at Brookfield Zoo?
In this group we have 5 animals. As I mentioned before, we have a mom. She's 13 years old, and then these are her 4 adult offspring that are between 9.5 and 10 years old. They're from 2 different litters.
How old can they live?
The oldest meerkat documented in a zoo was 17 for female and 22 for male. Those are very exceptional. Early teens would be more normal, between probably 10 and 12. So our animals are all pretty mature and have been here for a long time.
Can they jump?
They can jump just a little bit. You can see when they're climbing these various levels of the exhibit that they can't jump very far. Their back legs are strong, but they're not muscular like an animal that can really jump high. So they could jump a few inches, but that's about as high as they can go.
How many babies can they have at once?
They could have up to 7 or 8 babies. 3 at a time is probably more average. But they are able to have anywhere between 1 and about 7 or 8. I'm going to throw them some of the worms right now on the ground in the mulch so you can get a chance to see them digging. And you might notice that as I'm feeding them, I'm spreading the food out, and that way we make sure everybody gets a chance to get some. And if they don't find all these worms right now, it gives them something else to do and look for later on in the day when maybe the keepers are doing something else. You can see how much they really like those insects. They're really looking for them.
How much do they weigh?
The average weight of a meerkat is about 1.5 to 2 pounds. You can see we have a variety going on here where some are bigger than others, just like most animals and people too.
What do they use their tails for?
Good question. As you can see when they're walking around and standing up on their hind legs, their tail does help them balance when they stand on their hind legs. And as I mentioned before, they also can use their tail to communicate with each other. So if an animal has its tail sticking straight up while the animal's walking, that shows that they're really interested in something, or sometimes if they're alarmed by something, they'll put their tail up really high.
Why are they the color that they are?
Well, in their native habitat, they live in areas that are kind of open, savanna, grassland, or with a little bit of trees. So a lot of their environment is brown, and this brown color helps them blend in. So you can see they have a little bit of faint stripes on them. So if they were in some vegetation, that might help break up that outline and make it more difficult for a predator to see them and find them.
How tall do they get?
When they're standing on their hind legs, they're probably a little over a foot or 1.5 feet tall, depending on the individual. When they're walking on all fours like this, like they normally do, they're probably about 4 to 6 inches high.
Do they make good pets?
Meerkats look really cute, but they would not be a good pet. It's hard to see on this video, but they have long, sharp claws for digging, and they have sharp teeth for crunching up insects and food that they would find. So they're not a very good pet for your furnishings in your house. Also, they need a family to live with of their own kind. So they would not be very happy if they were living in someone's home.
What are their names?
We have 5 individuals here. Their names are Winky, Goodwin, Pedro, Ellie, and Lefty Jr.
How long are their claws?
Their claws are not quite 1 inch long, but they're really sharp, and they need to be sharp because when they're catching animals in their native habitat, they have to dig through branches, maybe rotten wood, to get insects or grubs out. They have to dig through the soil to get some of their food. So they really need sharp claws to be able to get their food out of those areas.
What's their social structure like?
That's a really good question. These guys have a pretty loose social structure. There is an animal that's dominant usually in a meerkat group, which means that that animal is kind of the boss of everybody else and maybe gets first access to resources like food or resting places. but they're not very strict about it here in the zoo because it is a mom and her offspring, and they've lived together their whole lives. They're pretty relaxed with each other.
Do they have good hearing?
Their hearing is probably similar to what our hearing is. Maybe a little bit better because they do have to listen. If they're in their native habitat, they do have to listen for sounds from maybe insects that are buried that they're trying to find, or predators coming. But their really superpower in terms of senses is their nose. They do have a really good sense of smell, which, as you can imagine, helps them find those insects that might be buried, or like buried fungus or other kinds of foods that they might want to get.
What's the most unique thing about a meerkat?
Well, I think one of their most unique things is some of those communication behaviors that I mentioned earlier. As I mentioned, they're in the mongoose family, and most mongoose species are not social. There's only a couple that are, one of which is the meerkat, and they're said to have one of the most complicated actual vocalizing languages in the animal world, because they do make so many different types of calls. Like I mentioned before, they make different calls for different types of predators when they see them, little different calls to each other when they're just hanging out, when they're looking for food. They're really vocalizing a lot that helps them stay in touch with their group and let the group know where they are and what they're up to.
Are they endangered?
Meerkats are not endangered. I don't think anybody really knows exactly how many are out in the wild, but they're not listed as endangered. Like most animals, their habitat is shrinking, but right now they're in good enough shape that they are not listed.
Can they climb trees?
Ooh, that's a good one. I don't really know. We have never seen ours try to climb anything, but we don't really give them big trees to climb on. I would suspect they might be able to climb something if it's on an incline, like we have a log over here that's leaning up against the rocks, but I don't think they would be able to climb a trunk that's straight up and down. And they really want to be on the ground anyway, because that's the place they would go to if they want shelter. As you can see, there's an animal here that keeps coming in and out of this rock. If they were in a tree, they wouldn't be able to take shelter from an aerial predator, like hawks or eagles are their most common predator, so it would be kind of dangerous for them to be hanging out in a tree. Well, thank you very much for spending time with the Meerkats today. We're glad you joined us, and we really appreciate your time. I hope you learned something, and thank you for coming.